Yo, what's going on? I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate y'all for joining me this Monday evening as we dive into these topics. My name is Marcus, and here we do attorney reactions to current events, trending news, all of that good stuff. What I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to incorporate is a little bit broader topic range into the show. So if it's something out there y'all want to see, y'all make sure y'all hit me up at officialdebtfreedad@gmail.com. As always, disclaimer: licensed attorney, not your attorney, not legal financial advice, infotainment purposes, as I give my opinion and takes on topics. The overarching topic of this video today is layoffs. Federal layoffs are happening. There are layoffs happening on the private sector. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the residual effects. I would tell everyone I released a video that addresses veterans priority ranking when it comes to federal layoffs. I'll probably pin that video to the comment, but if you know a vet out there who's employed with the federal government, make sure you shoot them this video. It's good information to know. I'm no means an expert at employment law, but I did take a look at the Veterans Protection Act, the applicable United States Code, and I tried to present something that could give everybody a little insight so the vets out there know where they stand. So we got about 12 minutes of video today. Our topics are going to range from a Tiffany Henyard lawsuit to layoffs to scams related to unemployment job searches out there, which are going to increase. So we got to talk about all that. Just stay tuned. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, if you check out something, see something you like and enjoy, I invite you to like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that good stuff. Let's go ahead, jump into the video. The first video is less than a minute, but it's very interesting because we are almost at crunch time when it comes to the Tiffany Henyard story as it relates to her role as mayor. So we almost have some finality. Let's check out this very first story.
Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard's lawsuit against the village trustees has been dismissed. Henyard accusing the trustees of conspiring to take away her authority to appoint a new police chief, village administrator, and village attorney after trustees sued to block Henyard from making those decisions. The judge dismissed the case after no one from Henyard's legal team showed up to a hearing earlier this week.
Watch. Okay, that was the shortest Tiffany Henyard story you're ever going to get on this channel. The case was dismissed. The reason it was dismissed was because no one from her attorneys, none of her attorneys showed up to court. The fact that they didn't show up to court proves one of two things, or one or two things, more likely. It could be both. Both things could be true. One, the lawsuit was bull crap to begin with. Two, her attorneys knew it was bull crap, so they was like, I'm not going to show up, stand on that business. As far as I'm concerned, at this point, every court is just going to say, you know what, I'm going to stay hands off. We're about a week away from the election when it comes to her being the mayor of the village of Dalton. Let's just let the chips fall where they may. I have a strong suspicion she won't be around in that role much longer, so that's going to be about a $50,000 loss she's going to have to take. But I thought it was interesting that, consistent with what we've always and have been seeing from her attorneys, they filed some shit. They probably filed it wrong, but even when they filed it, they didn't show up. And the reason that they didn't show up is because I just don't think they had a case in the first place. They were just either they don't have a case, or they just will. They either, or the attorney could just be like, you know what, fuck it. You know what, I'm tired, y'all tired, we all tired. I'm just not even going to address it. It's kind of goofy, but it's consistent with what we've been seeing all along. Now, let's go ahead and check out our next video. This next video is interesting because we're going back to Chicago. We're going to talk about Mayor Brandon Johnson and former Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and a finding by the Illinois Inspector General Office as it relates to the mayor's office, is something that the IG said is looking a little shady, is looking a little sketch. I wanted your opinion on it. I thought it was an interesting topic as somebody who, hey, I got a lot of my legal roots in the Inspector General community at the state level, at the federal level. So I thought it was an interesting story. Let's go ahead, check this story out, and y'all let me know y'all thoughts. Come on, Circle.
We're going to look now tonight at more turmoil at City Hall. New allegations that the law department could be trying to slow roll investigations that could be embarrassing the mayor's office.
Charlie Wojciechowski talked to the city's inspector general.
Disturbing new allegations from the watchdog office of the Chicago Inspector General. Did the mayor and the city's law department try to hold up investigations to keep negative information from becoming public?
At bottom, all of these concerns have to do with the larger question of whether we can allow City Hall, the mayor's lawyers, to choose what people and programs and information is susceptible to oversight and which isn't.
The answer is no. As an inspector general, if you allow the mayor's office to dictate what you release and when you release it, you are soft as baby shit. That's just me. Now, I know I've seen it. Some inspector generals, they'll do a report or a finding against the mayor or some politician. The normal protocol is I do an inspection, an investigation, an audit of a program. I find that the mayor's office did something goofy. As a courtesy, I provide the mayor a copy of the report just so the mayor can see what I'm about to drop on that ass and in the next 24, 48 hours or what have you. Now, some inspector generals are kind of goofy, so they'll give it to the mayor and let the mayor office take stabs at editing it or massaging the language. That's bullshit. Is no way. The inspector general is supposed to be fair and impartial completely. Most inspector generals are appointed by the mayors, but they are staggered. So the mayor has a 4-year term. The inspector general have a 6-year term. And the reason it's staggered like that is so that the mayor who appoints the IG isn't always under the eye of the IG that they actually appointed, because the term limit for the IG outlasts the term limit of the mayor. That's how it should work. So the answer is no. The mayor's office, City Hall, should not have no impact on anything the IG doing outside of getting the, hey, here's a cursory preview of what we about to hit you with because y'all was doing some goofy shit.
Susceptible to oversight and which isn't.
In this 17-page letter to the chairman of the Committee on Ethics and Government Oversight, IG Deborah Witzberg complains that under both Lori Lightfoot and Brandon Johnson, the city's law department has picked and chosen which of the OIG's administrative subpoenas they would comply with, cited attorney-client privilege to avoid handing over embarrassing documents, and insisted on having its lawyers sit in on sensitive interviews.
Okay, now real quick, let's talk about these 3 things. You don't get to pick and choose what subpoena you respond to when you're getting a subpoena by an inspector general's office. Normally, there's something in the statute that says, I'll speak from experience. In the District of Columbia, if the District of Columbia Inspector General sends a subpoena to any government employee or elected official, they actually have an obligation to comply. If they don't comply, for employees, they could actually be terminated. If an elected official chooses not to apply, then the inspector general can enforce the subpoena and actually go to court. Do they ever do that? Most times, no. I've never seen, when I was at a local state inspector general subpoena having to be enforced, because people complied with them because they knew they had an obligation to comply. Okay, citing privilege. Can privilege prevent you from disclosing something pursuant to inspector general subpoena? Yes. If it's something that's attorney work product, attorney client privilege, yeah, there could be some protections there that would require you not to divulge it in a subpoena. So they may have some viable points. With sitting in on sensitive interviews, city council have their attorneys sit in on the interviews. I just don't think that is uncommon. I've seen it happen. I've seen it not happen. Most times it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, or if someone says, hey, I'm doing an interview with the inspector general, but our agency attorney is going to sit down, it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but it's extremely, extremely rare.
Yes. hindrances rise to the level of interference with your investigations?
In the big picture, as we look at the overall landscape, yes.
15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez agrees.
What we see is a very disturbing trend by this administration using the tools of government for their weaponization and political purposes.
In a statement, a law department spokesperson says for the past 3 decades, previous city inspector generals have properly accepted that the legal rights of city employees and the legal interests of the city rightfully justify our practices. This is both legal precedent through case law as well as procedural jurisprudence that dictates how we must conduct ourselves.
All of those practices meaningfully limit the effectiveness and the timeliness of our investigative work.
Now Witzberg is seeking new laws and new rules to protect the independence of her office. At City Hall, Charlie Wojciechowski, NBC5 News.
Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. A lot of times with local inspector generals, they try to mirror their legislation that establishes them as an organization after the federal government. But there are a couple of problems with that. One, the legislators, the city council who actually create these organizations could, on the front end, let's just think about it. If you are a member of a city council and you're creating an inspector general that could investigate and look into your dealings, it might be some reason where you may decide to handcuff them legislatively and not allow them certain freedoms, certain things to do to limit their ability to look into you. That's what shady people do. Hey, this is Chicago, so I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case. Apparently, this is being done by Mayor Brandon Johnson's office, as well as the previous mayor, Lori Lightfoot. So I don't think that I'm shocked at all that this is actually happening. I think it's going to require a legislative fix because why are they going to give the inspector general in Chicago any more authority to look into wrongdoing that they might be doing? That's just kind of, I've been down this Dalton road. I've been down the conflicts road of local politics. There's no way that's going to happen without some type of legislative enactment. And that would even be sketch. I can't even see a scenario where the local Chicago legislators will actually pass those type of laws to give the IG that much power and enforcement authority. I just don't see it happening. But I do agree with what the inspector general said. Those general things, you should be able to issue a subpoena and they should be required to comply with it or their job or enforcement of that subpoena would actually be at issue. I thought that was an interesting story. Now, let's take a quick pivot because we're going to talk about the layoffs. We're going to talk about the federal impact, the private sector impact, some of the consequences of that. Again, y'all check out the video I put out today related to veterans protections when it comes to federal reduction in force. It was a very good video. If you know a veteran out there, make sure you share it with them. But when there are layoffs, when the job market is kind of scarce, that's going to increase the amount of job scams that are out there, especially with regard to work from home job scams. A lot of people, they told y'all get your ass back to work. People are upset. They may have been laid off, and now that they're laid off, they're looking for a job opportunity where they can work from home. And one of the things you got to be cognizant of is there are going to be people out there trying to finesse and take advantage of the situation. So let's check out this next story about a bogus work from home situation, because I want to make sure anyone out there who is doing the job search, we understand and can identify the real from the fake opportunities.
A Houston woman who thought she'd found a great work from home opportunity is now worried that she'll never get paid and end up homeless instead.
Fox 26 business reporter Tom Ziska is looking into what happened. Tom.
Rashi Caroline, in retirement, Mildred Bedar needed to supplement her income, so she was excited when she was approached by a company that found her resume on an online job service.
Rule number one, if someone reaches out to you for a job, it's probably looking sketch. I'm gonna just keep it buck. It's a very small percentage of the population where employers are directly reaching out. Most times when that happens, it's either an army recruiter. It's either an army recruiter. B, you see it happen a lot with professionals where if I put my resume on a posting as an attorney or a pharmacist, it's probably a little bit more common in those spaces. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but automatically kind of look at it sketch. My son, when he graduated, I read it on a live stream. They reached out, was like, "Hey, we'd like to offer you a job." It was a company called Vector, and Vector wanted my son to sell Cutco knives. I was like, typically, the only jobs that reach out to you are either army recruiters or it's probably something that may be too good to be true. Now let's go and let's finish letting this video play. But just take it as a cause to pause if somebody reach out to you about a job. I'm not saying it's not legit, but you should be very sketch about it.
Bedard needed to supplement her income, so she was excited when she was approached by a company that found her resume on an online job service.
This is a package from Amazon. It's addressed to me.
The package of women's tops is one of the few Mildred Bedard still has of the couple dozen she received after the first of the year as part of her job.
I check and make sure there was no damage to the packages and the merchandise inside the packages.
Terrible.
And then to reseal the packages back up and then ship them out, which I responded to her. And
The offer came just before Christmas from a Kentucky company saying she might be a good fit for them.
The other thing that this company did here is I guarantee you when they looked at her resume, they probably targeted her as well because of her age. It's a work from home opportunity. Again, they generally scammers look to target persons who are vulnerable. So senior citizens, persons who may have some type of cognitive or maybe slightly developmentally delayed. So that's another thing that you got to be on the lookout for. And if not you, especially for your loved ones.
A subsequent employment agreement promised $2,900 a month plus a $20 a package bonus. But after a month's work,
they told me that I would get paid. My first paycheck would go out on February 7th. On February 7th, I called to make sure everything was going on. I couldn't get anybody on the phone.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
sadly, neither could we. Google Maps shows the address for Cargo Nest LLC leads to this nondescript building in Covington, Kentucky. The Better Business Bureau has no complaints of the business on record, but says the circumstances sound suspicious.
If she has not been paid and suddenly the business has gone dark, there's no evidence that they're still operating or way to contact them to ask for any type of payment, and that is very suspicious.
Yeah, I'll be homeless if I don't get this money.
For Mildred Bedard, it is potentially catastrophic as she's about to lose her rent house with no way to pay for something new. She just wants to be paid what she's owed.
A 60-year-old woman with her service dog out on the street or in their car is not something I would think about.
Now, the circumstances of Mildred's job sound a lot like a reshipping scam that the Postal Service warns about, where products can be acquired illegitimately, maybe using a stolen credit card, then laundered through a reshipper who just thinks he or she is sending things along. It's hard to imagine why that middle step would even ever be necessary. So to help identify legitimate work-from-home opportunities, the BBB suggests starting by looking for direct interviews, some sense that the company's trying to properly vet its candidates, and be suspicious if the payment seems extreme for the work. Too good to be true? Probably is. And certainly research the company with an eye toward complaints about how they operate. So I did send an email to that HR person with whom Mildred spoke. If that person responds, maybe we can get the money that Mildred earned.
That lady ain't going to respond. The HR there is not going to respond because there is no HR. It's a scam. It's a finesse. We looked at a video like this before where a lady, this is crazy. If a job asks you to pay money before you start the job, it's not legit. That's funny. Melanin Queen shot at hey, it is a scam. They sent my son a letter literally like 3 days after he graduated high school. And then when he came home from winter break, they sent him another letter. The funny part was he showed me it wasn't funny. Well, it was kind of hilarious, but it was sad as well. The funny part was my son was in a group chat and he said that he showed me the message one of his friends had messaged in the group chat, was like, yo, I know y'all think this is probably a scam, but it's not. I got a job. Any of y'all want to buy knives? And my son was like, oh, you got scammed. Like, they are trying to take advantage of young people, senior citizens. We did another video like this where a lady was of the belief that she would receive compensation for watching movie previews all day. She was required to send some type of fee to the company, and after she watched hours worth of movie previews, they would send her fee plus some additional money, which they did the first 2 or 3 times. After that, they ended up finessing her for tens of thousands of dollars. So just be very careful. This economy, I believe, is going to take a significant downturn with federal layoffs, with layoffs in the private sector. And that's going to open the door for people who are douchebags to try to take advantage of people when they are at their weakest. So just keep your eyes open, keep your head on the swivel. Google is your best friend. If you get an opportunity, literally put the company name in, then the word scam afterwards, and just read what you see on the internet, on open source, on Reddit. That'll give you some good granularity. With that in mind, let's pivot to another. It was a scam. This isn't really necessarily about the type of scam. This is about what your obligation is or should be to keep track of your own personal accounts. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, like maybe if you like independently wealthy and you at the bank and you sitting on like 10 M's or something in the bank, you go 6-7 months without looking at your account. I don't do that. I don't know about y'all. I look at my shit every day. I look at my shit every day. If something is off about my account, I'm going to catch it in 24 to 48 hours, not even business days. That's not business time. 24 to 48 hours. If something is wrong with my account, I'm going to catch it. But there are people out there who has accounts and don't look at them at all. That's a big mistake, and we're going to see why in this next story.
NBC5 responds, when was the last time you checked the balance of your savings account? If you haven't looked for a while, your bank may not have.
At least 2-3 times a week, you should be checking it. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care how. When I had no money in there, I would always check it, hoping for a mistake. I was like, please, Lord. That's when you know you broke, when you plan for mistakes. I'm like, please, Lord, make a mistake and deposit somebody money in my account so I had some money. But when I was broke as hell, I checked it. Now that I'm not broke as hell, I still check it with the same amount of frequency. One reason I was praying for a mistake to put money in. Reason number 2, now on the other side, I'm like, hey, let me make sure everything on the up and up, nobody doing anything fraudulent.
Savings account. If you haven't looked for a while, your bank may not have your back if there's fraud on your account. This is a lesson one Calumet Heights woman learned the hard way, unfortunately. PJ Randawa shares the story.
I worked my butt off.
For 18 years, Courtney White was a sergeant with the Markham Police Department, and that's where she got her nickname.
Law enforcement is one of the hardest jobs that an individual can have. I feel sorry as soon as I understand how much overtime she had to work to be able to save up the amount that she lost. So this is actually terrible. And it's fucked up too. Whoever that bank is, they terrible as hell.
I was the overtime queen at work, so all my overtime money went into my savings for my family.
To help those savings grow, Courtney set up a Chase bank account in 2001 with no debit card and no checks.
I deliberately had my savings account set up where I would have to walk into the bank to make transactions.
And that's what Courtney did every month for years to withdraw money for her son's allowance.
How much money had been in there up until that point?
Probably about $100,000, between 80 and 100.
But one day in the fall of 2022, Courtney heard the words many of us dread: insufficient funds. For the first time in months, she checked her account balance.
There were days. For
the first time in months, 30 days should not go by where you don't look at any of your accounts. At least at a minimum, check it once a week. Your checking account, your saving account, your brokerage account. I actually caught a mistake on one of my investment accounts. And it wasn't even a personal investment account. It was like my 401k at my job that had a mistake on it where a certain amount of my money, they said it didn't vest, even though it was vested. So check it at least weekly. I say, I don't give a damn how rich or broke you are.
Daily withdrawals, probably two to daily withdrawals, probably two to four every day, thousands of dollars.
She learned someone had been impersonating her, withdrawing a total of $87,000 from her Chase account, mostly in person at this Chase branch on 103rd Street. It happened for more than a year.
If you look at all of the withdrawal slips, you can clearly see the difference in the handwriting. So I don't.
Here's what's crazy. We're going to rewind that back. But she said someone impersonated her and made withdrawals at the bank in person. And she said she didn't check it in a couple of months because something here is inconsistently. She said she didn't check it in a couple of months. The news broadcaster just said that someone was making withdrawals damn near a few every week for almost a year. So I don't know how long she went without checking that damn account. But to me, it would probably be longer than 2 or 3 months. Let's just rewind that back because they said that this has been happening for over a year. So she went a long ass time with just not. I can't have that much money. It could be $10 billion in my account. Let that shit be off by $10. I'm gonna be like, whoa. What is this for? I'm gonna ask.
Buying a total of $87,000 from her Chase account, mostly in person at this Chase branch on 103rd Street. It happened for more than a year.
If you look at all of the withdrawal slips, you can clearly see the difference in the handwriting. So I don't know how they couldn't catch that.
Courtney filed a police report and has filed several fraud claims with Chase Bank since then, but all of them denied. The reason? Chase said she hadn't reported the fraud within 30 days of receiving her statement.
Somebody should have recognized that this is an outrageous amount of.
Hey, I don't want to victim blame, and I agree. Somebody should have recognized this is a ridiculous amount of withdrawals. She said she didn't look at her account for 2-3 months. The news said that this was happening for over a year. That someone is you, man. I'm not saying the bank policy don't suck ass. A bank isn't going to try to help you. That's just kind of what it is. Banks aren't. They're going to look out for their own best interest, not your best interest. Maybe she gets some relief from this story. But when she said someone should have looked and noticed that this was going on, that someone is her. Is no, hey, I'm not trying to say it's your fault, but it's been going on for a year. You didn't notice thousands of dollars being withdrawn in person in your account because you just didn't check it. There's no level of comfort that anybody should have. I don't give a damn how much money you do or don't have. I'm not trying to blame her, but I'm blaming her. I know that's kind of terrible, but it is what it is.
Should have recognized that this is an outrageous amount of transactions.
30 days of receiving her statement.
Somebody should have recognized that this is an outrageous amount of transactions every day. There should have been some sort of alert. I've never banked like that. And like I said, I've had Chase for 20 years.
NBC5 Response took a closer look at that Chase Bank branch on 103rd. Chicago police records show more than half a dozen Chase customers who used this branch reported unauthorized withdrawals on their accounts within the past few years. The scenarios described, all similar to Courtney's.
Now, I would like to know, how long did it take for the average person who had this happen to catch it? I'm just looking. Let me see. Location. Theft over $500. I'm just looking at some of these reports. You got to be your own first line of defense. Now, that being said, I would guarantee that it's an inside job. Like, hey, I'm very familiar with white collar fraud, bank fraud. Filed those charges all the time. Investigated those cases all the time. This smells like it's an inside job. Probably someone who works there. It's probably multiple persons involved to include a particular teller. Honestly, if you go back and look at the amount of times that this has occurred, the very first thing that I would do is say, when did these transactions occur in person and who was the teller that they were actually with? I guarantee you it's a strong probability that you are going to find a pattern there.
The data also gave us more insight into what else was happening inside this Chase branch. We found more than a dozen Chase customers reported they were robbed or scammed while using the ATM inside the branch. Also frustrating, when it came to Courtney's case, she said Chase wouldn't provide any surveillance video to show who was making all of those withdrawals. In a statement, a Chase Bank spokesperson told NBC5 Responds it reviewed Ms. White's case from 3 years ago and has not reversed its decision. In response to our questions about all the police reports filed at Courtney's Chase branch, they would only say the safety of our employees and customers is our top priority, and our security team works closely with local law enforcement to monitor and ensure that. But as a result of losing her life savings, Courtney says she had to make the heartbreaking decision to take her son out of private school.
I worked hard for that money. And that's what I did for a living, help people who are victims of crimes, fraud. And here I became a victim myself.
Here are some key takeaways. Make it a habit to check the balance on all your bank accounts. Like Chase, your bank may require you to file a fraud claim for suspicious charges within 30 days of receiving your account statement. Set up balance or transaction alerts for your accounts, even the ones you don't use very often. PJ Randhawa, NBC5.
All right. I think that was a crazy story. I feel really bad. This lady can't put her kids in private school no more. It's terrible. Really, she probably isn't going to get any recourse. I hate to say it. She's probably not going to get any recourse. The only thing that could happen, I've seen this happen before, once they put the story out on the news, and this is crazy because this occurred in 2022, but this just broke as a story recently in the past few days. But I have seen instances once they put the story out on the news, the bank will be like, okay, we'll make an exception. But the first line of defense to make sure your shit is straight is you. It's not gonna fall or land on nobody else. I don't know about y'all, but like I got like specific limits on withdrawals that I can make. It's been times where I would like have a car in the shop and that purchase maybe, let's say it's $5,000. I gotta pay $5,000 for repair costs on one of these stupid ass cars I got, right? To make that purchase, I would actually have to call my bank first because I have a limit set at like maybe 3,000. So I would actually have to call my bank and be like, yo, I'm about to make this purchase for X amount of dollars. And they'll say, okay, we'll take off that limit for the next 24 hours. So you good to go. And I'd be like, all right, bet. So, hey, you are the first line of defense to make sure that you don't get finessed. That's actually a terrible story. I hope she has some recourse, but I'm gonna be honest, it's probably not looking good. It's probably multiple transactions. That's a terrible story. I feel really bad for her, but you gotta stay vigilant and keep your eyes open. I don't know. I literally look at my bank account probably every day. I look in it every day just to make sure when I get a direct deposit, I'll be like, is that right? Okay, and make sure that's right. That's just how I am. Y'all may be more comfortable than I am not to do that, but you know, it may be trauma from being broke for a long time and growing up without much. But I look at my shit pretty much every day, multiple times every day. Actually, it's pretty ridiculous. Actually, I probably don't need to do it that much. All right, so now let's take a pivot and get into what we are going to talk about with the layoffs, because I've seen two sides of this story. I've seen a lot of YouTubers saying like, yo, this is what Trump was elected to do. And yes, we want to find fraud, waste, and abuse and cut shit and trim down the government and cool. I got it. Then I see the other side of the story is like, yo, what about the side effects? All these farmers in Kansas are complaining now because U.S. aid had their funds froze, and the funds that were frozen were funds that were allocated to pay them because U.S. aid would buy their grain and rice and wheat and ship it to these countries who needed it. So I've seen both sides of the story. It's interesting to see where everyone falls on this. But let's take a look at these government layoffs. Then we're going to look at the residual effects. And I told y'all, for the folks who are members, I'm a federal employee who's a veteran who is in his probationary status. So this stuff is real life. It impacts everyone. And I talk a little bit in the members only live stream about how that situation plays out. Let's take a look at this video, see what's going on with these federal layoffs.
We go now to Washington, and the Trump administration's beginning mass layoffs of federal workers impacting multiple agencies. Tens of thousands of employees are expected to lose their jobs. Our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, is tracking the latest from the White House. Good morning, Rachel.
Rebecca, good morning to you. And federal workers who did not resign as part of that buyout offer were warned that they could possibly be laid off or fired. And this morning, we are learning that mass layoffs have started across multiple federal agencies.
Okay, now let's talk about the buyout, because I did talk about the buyout. To be fair, we got to be fair. Whether or not the buyout, the courts moved forward with the buyout, the courts was like, okay, that's cool. That was no issue. Now, there's some other legal challenges that's going to appear or occur because of that fork in the road buyout. But to be fair, there was an offer. Now, whether you trust the validity of that offer or not, that was completely up to you. But the offer did, trust me, I saw the offer. I saw it in my email. It said, hey, if you stay, we want to thank you for your service, but be aware there are going to be some cuts, potential layoffs, potential furloughs. You assume the risk. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because the people who accepted the fork in the road are supposed to be getting paid until September 30th. So it's going to be interesting to see, one, if they get paid, and two, if they continue to get their pay and benefits all the way throughout September 30th, because there were a lot of discussions about whether or not it was valid, whether or not it could be a federal finesse and all these other things. But we got to keep it objective. Hey, if you stayed and didn't accept it, it was given to every federal employee across the board with very few exceptions. Those who didn't take it, it was patently obvious that, hey, this was coming down the road. So let's just keep it a buck. Not saying it's good or bad. We got to call the facts the facts. The other thing before we jump back in the video, as somebody who worked in the federal inspector general community where the mandate is to identify fraud, waste, and abuse, generally, because I have some issues with this, and it's not about really the firings and all of that. I'll explain my issues a little bit later on. But generally, when you want to identify waste, abuse, fraud, it's better to target the programs that have the most money, because the programs that have the most money have the most opportunity for fraud. So the Department of Health and Human Services has $1 trillion budget. The Department of Defense probably has $1 trillion or $1 billion budget. Those are probably the biggest earmarks on the federal budget. Those would be if they hired me and said, hey, identify fraud, waste, and abuse, I'm going after high value targets. I'm looking at the places with the most money, because that's the most opportunity for fraud. So I get and I understand cutting fraud, waste, and abuse, but let's put it into context. Federal payroll, we're talking about every salary that every federal government employee gets, to include the 401k, TSP match, benefits. It only accounts for 10%. Some estimations were 8%. Let's give it an optimistic. Federal payroll of every federal employee only accounts for 10% of the budget. So when you're talking about bang for your buck, just for me, this isn't the place where you're going to get the bang for your buck. If you cut, hey, we fired 200,000 federal employees, it's not going to be a big identifier of fraud, waste, or abuse as it would be if you're looking at an agency that has $1 trillion budget. That's just kind of my take on it. But let's go ahead and get through the video. I just wanted to put it into context. 10% of the total federal spending is accounted for by federal employee salaries, wages, benefits, and all of that.
This morning, the Trump administration taking its sweeping efforts to shrink the size of the federal workforce one step further, ordering agencies to lay off nearly all probationary employees, meaning those hired within the last 1 or 2 years, a move that could impact as many as 220,000 federal workers. At the Department of Veteran Affairs alone, more than 1,000 new workers were dismissed. Overnight, the Consumer Financial Protection.
Real quick, I will tell you, my fault, I didn't put the thing up. I will tell you, as a veteran, veterans are not happy about that shit. As somebody whose father is a veteran, who's a 100% disabled vet, literally his VA disability and health care are the sole things that provide him with income outside of his social security or retirement and everything like that. Veterans are not happy about the 1,000 persons who were terminated from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Now, I know y'all hear 1,000, and it's sad when people lose their job. Trust me, I lost my job before. I know how it goes, but let's put it in the context. The Department of Veteran Affairs hires about 395,000 people. So 1,000 persons fired is a small drop in the bucket, but this is getting a lot of pushback from veterans because veterans are people who made significant sacrifices to their physical, mental health, and so forth for this country, and they upset. And veterans do vote. Trust me, I know they're upset about this shit for real. Let's see. Hey, I actually got a story about that. Like, hey, sometimes you get what you vote for. I agree, AP. I wonder how many of those federal employees actually voted for MAGA. I agree. There are a lot of them who actually did that. But let's go and finish letting this play out, and I'm going to tell you the story about that in a little bit.
Action Bureau also firing term employees.
Oh, real quick. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the CFPB. This is an agency that was actually spearheaded by Elizabeth Warren. Of all the agencies, every agency has fraud, waste, and abuse. That's just, if there's money being doled out, there's somebody there to finesse it. I would like to highlight, though, the actual role of the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So when credit card companies are trying to take advantage of people, charging you overdraft one purchase, and then they try that purchase 4 different times and hit you with 4 overdraft fees. The CFPB were the agency were like, yo, y'all doing too much, banks. The shit is getting kind of crazy. It's getting out of control. Y'all can't do this. So this is actually an agency that's designed to help consumers. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we're watching this.
Firing term employees with expectations that the rest may be fired today, leaving a skeleton staff of around 5%. The CFPB and VA are just 2 of several agencies that have started to cut federal workers so far. The administration also targeting the Department of Education and the Environmental Protection Agency. The largest federal employee union slamming the layoffs, calling it a blatant violation of the principles of fairness and merit that are supposed to govern federal employment, and saying the firings are about power. At some agencies, workers learned by email they had been laid off, but at the Office of Personnel Management, others found out on a call.
Listen to this call. This call was interesting. Of course, if it's a call or email, it's going to make its way to the news.
You will receive your termination notice via email shortly. As a result, your employment with the Office of Personnel Management will end today.
Elon Musk, who has billions of dollars in federal contracts and is spearheading the efforts to slash government spending, also calling for the elimination of whole agencies. Musk sitting down with Indian Prime Minister Modi Thursday before he met with President Trump. The president unsure the capacity of Musk's meeting and whether Musk was acting as a private citizen wanting to do business in India or a member of the administration.
Even he confused as to what the hell Elon Musk is doing. Like, it's just confusing.
I would imagine he met possibly because, he's running a company.
Trump pushed on how a foreign leader may know the difference.
Well, he's meeting with me in a little while, so I'm going to ask him that question.
So the Indian prime minister was also asked if they discussed any business. He would only say that he has known Elon Musk for a very long time, guys.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for your report.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's pivot to this comment because I know persons personally who they weren't terminated, okay? This is a real life story. I know persons personally who are professionals, attorneys, and when you get an offer from the government, if you aren't familiar, as with most jobs, you get a tentative offer. Hey, we check your background, everything is cool. Here's your tentative offer. And then you accept that tentative offer. We're going to hire you for this position at this grade, at this pay. Once you accept that tentative offer, then generally after the acceptance of the tentative offer and the final offer is where you start to ask about pay. Hey, y'all want to pay me whatever, 172. I think I should get 195 for these reasons. Everybody should argue over their pay. Never be scared to argue over your pay. If you argue over your pay at a job, and because you argue over your pay or try to get more money, they rescind the offer, that's a place you didn't want to work in the first place. But tentative offer was made. After the tentative offer was made, in anticipation of the final offer coming in, big relocation was done. I'm talking about move family, spouses, furniture, entire relocation done. Everything is fine and dandy. Everything is going according to plan. President Trump is elected. On day one, he signs an executive order during a hiring freeze. That hiring freeze, essentially, anyone who hasn't accepted a final offer, you're asked out. So this person had a tentative offer for a six-figure job on the table. He accepted that tentative offer. He was maybe days away, no more than a week. I think probably under a week from getting his final offer. But once that executive order for that hiring freeze was signed, they were asked out of luck. And you know how stressful that is? You just moved your family. You got a whole new mortgage or rent, all this other shit. I know that's probably sucked. But one of my very first thoughts, AP, was, I wonder how this person voted. So I did, in fact, ask. I was like, hey, everybody's vote. You're entitled to your own vote. Everybody on this channel, they'd be like, I don't know if you MAGA or what. But this dude voted, and he did vote for President Trump. He was like, I voted for Trump, but I didn't vote for this. And I was like, I was kind of confused because I thought that we all knew that this was coming when President Trump was in office. I thought he was candid about wanting to shrink the government. I don't know what people interpreted shrinking the government as, but I anticipated layoffs, furloughs, exactly what's going on. So there are people who voted for it, who it's happening to, and they aren't happy about it. And they probably will be, they may be reconsidering how they vote in the future, but it does reach out and touch everyone. I feel bad either way, whether you voted for him or not. To go through this is something that's a pain in the ass. And I don't know, y'all let me know in the comments, but I'm kind of confused because the mandate that's being given by the president is we're going to bring down the size of government, and people should go to the private sector where their skills can dictate their compensation. I get that, but the problem is the federal government layoff and freezing of funds is actually impacting the private sector. I'm going to pull up this article real quick because I want to read this because I thought this was interesting. I saw it and I was like, let me screenshot this. Let me screenshot this because I didn't have time. I didn't have time to set it up on a platform. But it says a Boston health firm lays off half of its staff amid U.S. aid funding freeze. This was 5 hours ago. A company described as a difficult decision when a global public health company firm announced that it would be laying off half of its employees, about 250 individuals. So I'm thinking that the economy is about to take a big hit, a big kick in the nuts, personally, because of the federal layoffs. Then people can't matriculate into the private sector because the private sector is also downsizing because it's just a ripple effect. The housing market, it's all a ripple effect. And now I want to pivot so we can see this next story to see how this is playing out in Kansas. Now, Kansas was definitely a red state, so I'm sure a lot of these people probably voted for President Trump, even though whether they did or didn't is of no consequence because the impact is the same. But I think it's an interesting take on how things play out.
For more than 70 years, the U.S. government has purchased surplus grains from American farmers and sent them overseas to feed hungry communities from Africa and Asia to South America and Ukraine. The program is called Food for Peace. And in 2022, it provided 4 billion pounds of food to 58 million people. But tonight, all that is in jeopardy after the Trump administration's decision to freeze funding for USAID Hundreds of millions of dollars and millions of tons of wheat, lentils, and rice are stuck in ports and warehouses across America and around the globe. We're joined now by Kansas farmers Vance and Luis Emke. Their farm produces grain that ultimately makes it overseas. Thank you both so much for your time.
These farmers had no clue after the election that U.S. aid would be on the verge of being dismantled. More importantly, they had no idea that the funds that U.S. aid distributed for the goods and services they provide outside of the United States would be frozen. This has a direct impact on the U.S. economy. So not only are the farmers not receiving their funds, so they can't get rid of their crops, they may not be able to get rid of them. They may have to sell it at a loss. If they sell it at a loss, they actually have a workforce who they have to provide compensation for. Are they going to have to lay those people off? So this economy is about to get really tight. Let's go and finish up this story. Then we're going to wrap about what can you do in the event that you are laid off. And the best way we're going to talk about this is I'm going to tell y'all what my black ass is going to do if I'm laid off. It is what it is. You got to A. It can hit it. Anybody could get it.
Vance, let's start with you. Your wheat farm has been in the family since the 1880s. How does it make you feel to know your grain has gone to help people who so desperately needed it?
Now, I don't know what their voting demographic was, but they're in Kansas. We know which way Kansas votes historically, so we can make assumptions, but they're being impacted big time.
Overseas.
Well, we do have a humanitarian and moral obligation to help, get food to these food deficient areas. It's also really good for developing goodwill with the United States.
And in Louise, Kansas Senator Jerry Moran says that stuck shipments have resumed, but taking a step back, if this program ultimately goes away, what impact will it have on your farm?
Well, the USAID annually buys about $2 billion worth of surplus ag commodities like wheat and grain sorghum that Louise and I grow right here on our farm. And that does help support net farm income. And by the way, we are having a real crisis out here in terms of income. Kent State University ag economists say cost of producing wheat is $2 a bushel higher than what the market is currently giving us. So, any market like through USAID is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, Louise, how would you say that the Food for Aid program has benefited you?
Well, it's been, there's only so many.
It's benefited them because they were getting that bag. They were getting a government contract. I used to have a freight brokerage business, so I know a lot about obtaining, applying, and getting government contracts. And I'm gonna just keep it a buck. Most times with most government contracts that I've seen as a member of the government, as a member of the military, as a civilian, they overpay for these contracts. I told the story multiple times on the channel when I was in Kuwait in 2003. War just started. I'm getting ready to ride my Humvee over, and we about to hit this convoy and go to Iraq and do what we need to do to make sure we come back. Dishwashers in Kuwait were contractors who were getting paid $120,000 to wash dishes. And the first $100,000 was tax-free because of the war zone, danger zone that they were in. At that moment, I was like, man, fuck, I need to get out of the military and get a contract job washing dishes. So how has this benefited them? They probably aren't going to say it, but it benefited them because they were making a shitload of money off of these contracts.
Many Kansans, and we cannot clearly eat all the wheat that we produce or the grain sorghum. And so we rely on customers, whether that's USAID or other countries through USAID. We need customers to buy our product, or we're SOL. I mean, we don't have a market, and it's critical, absolutely critical.
Well, anyway, these grain commodities are going to a lot of these food deficient areas like sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, Latin and South America, Ukraine, and are helping to build goodwill over there. And so that's a real strong plus for the program. But in addition, the USAID funds a lot of research at land-grant universities like K-State. And right now, $50 million worth of research at K-State is in jeopardy because of the problem right now with USAID.
We need that.
$50 million worth of research goes to Kansas State from USAID to do research. All that shit is now okay. We can argue over whether 50 mil should be going for research. That's we can argue, agree to disagree over that. But I say that to say that they had no clue that US aid would be impacted. Now their pockets are getting a little bit thinner. You know who else pockets is going to get thinner? Over there at the University of Kansas, where they were getting 50 mil to do research. They're going to lose staff. And I don't know what the percentage of employees that the University of Kansas accounts for, but normally in rural places like that, I saw another one about farmers in like Alabama and how Alabama, the university, hires something like 60% of the population in their local area. Oh, it's about to get real out there, and people are going to feel it. I don't care. It is not going to be a black white thing. It's going to be a you have it or you don't. It's an economy war, and you're going to feel the crunch. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't.
Funding for research for our, not just their varieties, whatever research, like we've been in a drought. We need drought resistant varieties. Farmers can't afford to do their own research. I mean, we don't have the plots, neither do they have the expertise.
And Vance, I know that you're a Republican in a community where 85% of voters cast their ballots for President Trump.
See, and you see, when I looked at this story, I didn't even watch the video. I figured they were Republicans, though. Like, hey, I'm not the most observant person in the world, but considering where they at, they owned this farm since like the 1800s. Like, if you owned the farm since the 1800s, we know who you had working that farm. We know. We know. You don't have to hide it. It is what it is, but we know. You come from, you got some long-standing money if you owned the farm since the 1800s, okay? Okay? So we kind of were able to figure that out with our context clues. I agree with you, sis. 50 million does sound a little bit wild for research. I'm not saying that the research isn't going to, I'm just saying, hey, all programs got fraud, waste, and abuse. 50 million for land grant research, I need to see the results of the research. What's going on, Rita? I appreciate you tuning in. But I agree with you. But we used that context clues and figured out that they were likely Republicans. So, hey, shout out to us for being able to use that context clues, or me in particular.
You have said that you did not vote for him. How is the move to dismantle USAID being received in your community?
Well, everybody looks at it from a very practical point of view that, there's a very valuable market that has vanished, and that's going to have a consequence on the Kansas City and Chicago Board of Trade.
Luis and Vance Emke, we thank you so much for your insight and sharing your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, hey, even the old school owned the farm since the 1800s. They were like, hey, we didn't vote for him. I don't know. They were like, we didn't vote for him. But they're Republicans, but they say we didn't vote for him. But everybody is feeling the pinch. Now, I'll tell you, I generally don't like to leave a video without just kind of talking about what I would do or what I would do if I were in that situation. Hey, let's just keep it a buck, okay? Y'all gonna know immediately. Y'all won't know immediately, but you all are gonna know if I go to work and I get an email and they like, hey, DFD, hey, your legal services are no longer needed. You know how you gonna know? You're gonna be like, man, DFD live streaming a lot. Why is he live streaming so much? But let's talk about a plan for if this impacts you, because right now, if you're going through this, there's probably wherever you are right now is the position you're going to be in. So it's not going to do you any good to say like, yo, what you should do is save up a pile of money and have these ends over to the side, stashed away, blah, blah, blah. Because you only can do what you can do in the moment that you have it. What's going on, Maddie? I appreciate you tuning in. But y'all gonna know if it happens to me because I'm gonna be live streaming every day. I'm gonna do a whole series on but laid off as a when I in 2019, 2020, 2019, no, in 2023, when my employment was up, I actually did a video series on that, and that just documented, hey, this is what's going on. We got a little bit of ends in the bank, what I was doing to make sure I don't run through all the money. And so generally you want to be in a place where you can kind of have a little bit of a nest egg stashed aside and you aren't over leveraged. You don't owe everybody and their mother. But the bottom line is you have to be in a position to hustle. Ain't nobody coming to knock on your door. Very few people are going to get calls where the job of your dream is going to just come and land in your lap. Hey, as a practicing attorney, I was a trial attorney. And after I would get out of a trial, not guilty as a defense attorney, not guilty. I would get my not guilty and then hop in my car and drive to job number 2. What was job number 2? I was working at a call center because I had something that I wanted to do. I needed to get more resources and more income to do it. And I was like, if I got to sit on the phone for 3-4 hours a couple times a week and can make some extra money to hit what my goal is, that's what I'm going to do. As a licensed attorney, you know what I did? I did Instacart. As a licensed attorney, you know what I did? I worked at UPS, or what we like to refer to as underpaid slaves, because working on that truck, I won't do that. I'm telling you right now. That's what I did as a young attorney. As the old man with gray hair right now, I'm not going to UPS. I'm not working on that truck in the cold, lifting. My joints and knee ligaments and cartilage aren't what they used to be. But the bottom line is any income is better than no income. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, yo, well, I'm just going to get my unemployment. I can't speak to everybody's situation, but unemployment where I'm at is like $400, $450 a week. I can't do anything with that. I can't do anything with that. So as an attorney, what normally happens is you can get contract work, and a lot of that contract work you can do remotely from home. It may require, I've had some in the past where it required me to go in, but if I had to go in, I had to go in. But normally you pick up contract work. Contract work would pay you on the low end for minimal experience, let's say $30 an hour. On the high end, if you have specialized experience in fraud, waste, different types of areas of the law, speak foreign languages, you can make anywhere from $75 to $125 an hour. It all depends. Man, I'm gonna be doing that shit. I'm gonna reopen my Instacart driver app. I might do some of that and film some of that content. I'm gonna be on here talking about that shit. The bottom line is you have to do what you have to do to make sure you can make the ends meet until you find your next opportunity that's going to pay you comparable to what you lost. On average, it takes about 6 months. Real talk. I lost my job. I probably sat at home for about 3 weeks before I was like, I need to get up and do something. And then I started doing contract work. I started doing I didn't do the gig work right away. I just kind of did it a little bit later because after I was off, I was just sitting around and I was like, man, I could be doing something else to make a couple dollars, make an extra $1,000 a week. So that was kind of what I did. So I was bringing in like between the contract work and the gig work, I was probably bringing in like, I don't know, I would say maybe $2,500 to $3,000 every week. And now I was coming in late as fuck, like 11 o'clock. I was just out driving buying groceries like a motherfucker. But you got to do what you got to do. Now, if you do and are fortunate enough to have some money in the bank, the name of the game is you want to get through this period without burning through all that money. So when you do land your job, you don't have to start from scratch. But it took me about 6 months to land a job where I made equal salary or I made more than what I did at that job that I lost. And I talked about that on the channel. It equated out to like a 50% pay cut for me for a 6-month period that I had to endure. That was one of the reasons when you talk about the fork in the road, I was like, it wouldn't be beneficial to me, because if it takes me 6 months, to find a comparable job. That's just kind of the nature of what it is. It's really only going to equate out to about 2 months worth of benefits. I'd rather roll the dice on, hey, let's just see where this thing goes. I know what my performance review says. I feel fairly confident that the bosses see the value. I know that there could be some exceptions and or exemptions made. I know that there are some protections afforded to veterans, like the video I put out earlier. So, I'm more inclined to say, let's see where it falls out, and it is what it is. Let's check out these comments before I get out of here. Let's see. Wow, I appreciate that, AP. University of Kansas supported the salaries of 4,182 people in 2022 and accounted for 53.9 million in spending with Kansas companies on research-related goods and services. The economy about to be tough. Like I told everybody, my goal for the next 4 years is I'm gonna keep grinding. I'm gonna keep investing. I'm gonna keep putting out content, because that's a revenue stream. I'm gonna keep doing whatever I can do to increase my revenue streams and maintain those revenue streams. But the other thing I'm doing over the next 4 years, which is going to be imperative, is don't over leverage yourself. No big purchases for the next 4 years for me. Like, the Tesla I want, that shit could wait. I got stuff to drive. I'm not going out to do some $15,000 vacation on some goof troop stuff. I just can't do it. About 33% of research funded employees were students, and about 20% were faculty. Whoa, that's damn. I appreciate that, AP. Shout out to co-counsel. Give y'all a round of applause. Y'all always come through with the facts and everything. So a round of applause to you all. I'm just saying it's going to be tough for everybody across the board. So I would just, for me, I'm just tightening up I'm tightening up my belt. No large purchases. If we go on a vacation 7-8 months from now, because things are going well, it's going to be a cheap ass vacation. Okay, not saying it's going to be like that in year 3 and 4, but year 1 and 2, we tightening up the belt. Now, before I get out of here, I want to touch bases on one last thing. Terrence, what's going on? I appreciate you tuning in. I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed just here. Someone asked me, what is my opinion on how the cuts are being done and how the layoffs are being identified? Okay. I think I'll go on the record and say, generally, I am not opposed to cutting spending when there's fraud, waste, and abuse. There are 2 things that gives me cause to pause with how it's being done. Under Bill Clinton, he implemented a buyout of federal employees, and federal employees were paid, I believe it was $25,000. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a $25,000. I just wanted to look and make sure. Yep. So, okay. Yes, Bill Clinton offered mass federal employee buyout. Here's why Trump's program is different. Okay, Bill Clinton issued an order on February of 93. So you always got to look at historically just to kind of see how things are done. So let's talk about it. Bill Clinton issued an order in February 1993 telling government departments and agencies with more than 100 employees to cut at least 4% of civilian positions over a 3-year period. So was a little bit of structure. 1994, Congress approved the Federal Workforce Restructuring Act, which allowed $25,000 buyouts for workers. Now, that $25,000 buyout in 1993-94, that's just probably the equivalent of $35,000, $40,000 in today's money. the Trump administration offered deferred resignation to about 2 million workers, and it's being challenged in court. Long story short, the reason that it's being challenged, Clinton had to go through congressional approval to get the authority to be able to do it. Even after he got congressional approval, like it said in that report, it was a 4% cut in staff over a 3-year period. So it was a much more strategic and tactical approach to doing the cutting. In addition, there were, and I read this before, there were a 6 to 8 month actual study within the Office of Personnel Management and within these organizations to identify target areas where these targeted cuts could be made. So I'm generally, as an employee, I'm generally not opposed to there being cuts and trimming the fat. The idea, though, is what method are we using to make sure we cut the fat off and we're not getting the succulent part of the steak that you want to eat? Like, okay, if you're trying to cut a fillet, but don't cut too far because you're cutting off the stuff that we want. So I think that's point number one. It's going to be challenged because of congressional authority, because of lack of congressional authority, even though I'm not opposed to cuts. I just want the cuts to be done in a way where they can't be challenged in court. It'll be terrible if all of these people who thought they submitted their resignation, if in 2 or 3 weeks they stop getting paid and now they're screwed. It'll be terrible. So that's point number one. The other point for me is, again, as somebody who comes from the IG community, I do not like fraud, waste, and abuse of government programs because it wastes our money. People who pay taxes is wasting our money when someone does some goofy shit with our tax dollars. So I'm completely on board with identifying fraud, waste, and abuse and eliminating it and coming up with plans to, put edits in place so that that doesn't happen again. But those are the two things that I'm missing with these cuts. It's one thing to have an audit of a government program done. And after a 3 or 4 month audit is done, they have a finding to identify the particular areas in the process where the waste, abuse, fraud is occurring. And now we got a plan to say, all of y'all are the ones who are screwing up. So let's get rid of all of y'all. What I can understand that approach. What I'm having a difficult time with here is those just sending folks in. They say that they're using complex algorithms to identify fraud, waste, and abuse. Show the findings of how that was done and what was done. I'm not a fan of you just telling me we identified this waste here. That's cool and dandy, but show me how you identified the waste. And if you're terminating these persons, what edits have you put in place to make sure that, because when you terminate a person's job, that job just doesn't go away. It's just absorbed by someone else or another entity or another organization. That's normally how it goes. So if you terminate someone who was the wasteful cog in the process and you don't have a plan in place to catch that waste before it happens, that waste is probably going to occur again to the next person who has that responsibility. So those are the things that are giving me cause to pause. Like, how are we making sure that we're trimming the fat and not actually cutting the good part of the steak off? And show us how you're coming to these conclusions that fraud is occurring. And when you identify that the fraud is occurring or the waste or abuse is occurring, if you're letting these people go, I'm fine with that. But once you let these people go, what are you putting in place to make sure that this shit doesn't happen again? Because if you don't put an edit in place, the same shit is going to happen again. And then you keep cutting jobs. Our responsibilities are moving to another person. And then the same shit happen. And that doesn't resolve the problem. And we've seen this happen when they fired a lot of people at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And then they were like, oh shit, these people have the nuclear codes. Maybe we should find these people and hire them back. And there's been reports that they haven't been able to identify and relocate some of the people that they want to bring back. That's the type of shit that I don't want to see happen. So it's a big mess. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Let's see. Yep, I'm a professor at a state-funded institution, and I'm sure there will be cuts to financial aid, which will undoubtedly impact colleges and universities. All right, I got a question to ask you. Okay, as a professor at a state-funded university, hey, I'm the product of state-funded universities for undergrad and law school, historically black colleges and universities. I'm proud that my son goes to an HBCU. Now, I got a question for you. This is just hey, Terrence, you're the right person to ask for this. Okay. I did a video where they talked about the elimination of the Department of Education. Now, the plan was, it's not really a plan. A plan is something that's written up. I haven't seen anything that was written, but the idea was to take certain things that the Department of Education do and transfer them to other federal agencies that would be more appropriate. So, federal student loans, money, it would transfer to the Department of Treasury. The stuff that the Department of Education does with persons with disabilities would transfer to the Department of Health and Human Services. Okay. Now, in theory, that sounds like an okay idea, but there are some problems with that, but I get it. But let me ask your opinion on federal student loans, because I believe that the federal student loan program, how could I put this? Let me know, do you agree with this and that, this statement? I think the cost of colleges and universities grew exponentially over the past 25 years, not solely because of inflationary costs, but I think a big portion of that was because higher education institutions, especially for-profit institutions, identified that students had a blank check in front of them when it came to federal student loans, and these loans were backed by the federal government. 50% of kids who go to college won't graduate. That's just a stat. It is what it is. I'm just calling it how I see it. But I think that the cost of college increased because colleges, in particular for-profit colleges, were aware that all students had a blank check, so they can increase their costs because students would want to go and would pay because they knew the government would just essentially subsidize it no matter what the hell they were going for. And I'll tell you the other thing with that is, I don't know. That's just my take. Let me know what you think. Let me see. Online programs has significantly increased access over the past 20 years. But the cost of housing and higher education are like the top of it's on the top of the list of increase over the past 25 years. I think, and I'm not saying the student loans shouldn't be a thing. I wouldn't have gotten a degree or the career I have without federal student loans. So I understand the need for them. But I think because they I think because schools know that students have a blank check and the federal government has subsidized these loans and back these loans, I think that a lot of colleges took advantage to overinflate their costs. That's why I wasn't a fan. As somebody who got student loans, who had student loans, I just paid my shit off, and it was a lot, 6 figures. I paid mine off because I was like, getting rid of everybody's student loans won't stop the problem. If you get rid of everybody's student loans today, in 15 years, it'll still be a student loan crisis because people will have student loans because the cost of student loans are going up. Because college, if I know I can start a for-profit college, charge $45,000 a year, and little Billy is going to want to go there and he'll get a loan for all 4 years, why not do that? And I worked briefly at the Department of Education, so I knew that they had implemented rules. I think it was called I can't remember. It's been a while since I worked there. But schools were getting so much, universities were getting so much money from the federal government, where the federal government had to create a law that said, if you don't get a certain percentage of your money from non-federal government sources, you can't even be a higher education institution, because there was institutions out here that were getting 95% of their funding from the federal government, and that shit was just kind of crazy. I don't know. That was just my thought. Blank check analogy. Okay. Yes, that is true. and there's tremendous amount of grade inflation. So college isn't as difficult as it even was 10 to 15 years ago. Okay, there's a new funding law for schools. If they discover that schools are using diversity, equity, and inclusion practices to decide who gets financial aid, those schools could lose their federal funding. Hey, that's going to be a big deal too to the schools that I went to, the HBCUs out there, because now you're getting on a thin line of how do you define the use of, if we take DEI out of the legal jargon, it's no longer being used by the school. How do you define, or who defines what's a DEI program and what isn't? And is it a DEI program if it's a historically black college? Like, I don't think so, because historically it was mostly African Americans. I attended probably one of the most diverse HBCU law schools there is. It was pretty much 50-50 at my law school. But I don't know. It's just, it's crazy. I got family members. I talked on the live stream. I tried to talk my little cousin out. And yo, she's probably the smartest kid that I've ever seen. I had a Rubik's Cube here, and I was really excited. After like 3 days, I had like 3 sides done. And when I came back, my Rubik's Cube was done. And I was like, who the fuck messed with my Rubik's Cube? She came and did it in like 3 seconds. But she was going to do engineering and computer science. And I was like, great. And she pivoted into like stage production at a university that cost something like $60,000 a year. And I was like, what? And my son, he wanted to go to a school that was $60,000 a year. It was a little bit easier for my son because I was like, yo, you can go wherever you want. But if you want to go somewhere that we can't afford, you paying for all of that. I'm not going to pay. If you go to a school that's $60,000 a year and I only got $15,000 a year to help you, I'm not going to give you $15,000 so that you got to get a loan for $45,000. That's a waste of my money. I might as well pass that on to the youngest or use it to do something that I want to do for myself. So it was a little bit easier with my son because I just told him, hey, if you want my help, you got to take my conditions. If you don't want my help, you can do it on your own. You can go do what I did, go be all you can be, or you could take 60,000. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed and we were able to talk him out of it. But this entire layoffs through the federal government isn't going to be as easy as a lot of people saying. Just matriculate your skills over to the private sector because the private sector are taking cuts as well. Let's see. I'm kind of on the pro side of getting rid of the Department of Education because I believe it would give states and local governments more freedom to tailor education policies. I actually kind of agree with you. we probably on the same side. I only worked at the Department of Education Office of Inspector General for a short period of time. I was on a detail there. But when I saw that Congress had to pass a bill because schools were receiving 100% of a school was receiving 100% of its funding for the government, and I was like, why is this happening? This shouldn't even be a thing. They had to create a rule like to say like, yo, if you don't get at least 15 or 25%, was it I can't remember, it was the 85-15 rule or whatever it was called. But the fact that they had to create that rule showed that a lot of universities were just sucking at were just receiving revenue from the faucet of the federal government. I agree. I think we're on the same side, but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in states based on the political makeup of that state. Because I looked at a study, and you probably saw the same study. I looked at a study, and it showed that I want to say the states that received the most federal funding for their schools and had the worst performance were like red states. It was like Alabama. I know for sure Alabama was in there. I don't want to throw a school in there, but it was mostly red states that were at the top of that list. Y'all receiving the most federal funding, and you all have the worst actual output. So I do agree that a lot of things should be handed to the state, but I'm not opposed to some sort of oversight. There has to be some sort of oversight. Oversight is different than being able to just put your hands in the gumbo and stir it up and enter metal so much. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I'm generally not opposed to getting rid of one thing if you have a plan as to how things should be done. I'm not opposed to things and decisions going back to the states in some capacity as well. So I think we agree there. They okay, they aren't receiving a blank check. Okay, so if they aren't receiving a blank check, now of course now let's just put this into context. So when students go to that, because you're talking about federal student loans that have a cap. Okay, if federal student loans have a cap, you know what happens? And I'm just telling you what I've seen. Schools who receive 85% or more before they changed the law, and this was recently. I'm gonna see what that rule is because I don't want y'all to think I'm making it up. I know because I had to do a legal write up on this rule. I can't remember if it was the 85-15 rule. Let me see. Hold on. Department of Education. Okay, I think it's right here. 85-15. Did I get that right? I'm trying to find it. Hold on. Department of Education. Fuck, I might have to look for it. But okay, let's see. Plus loans don't have a cap. Okay. But there's also there's a few things on the student loan side that are problems, okay? So yeah. And I've seen that too. Like I've seen parents like, okay, well, I'll just sign for the loans, but it's all of that shit is bad. That's just me. But there are a couple of things that facilitate the debacle that is student loans. One, the amount of loans that people can take out, whether it's the student or the parent. Two, the growth of for-profit institutions as well. Three, the supplementing of loans by the private sector, which is charging interest rates that are fucking out of this, that are insane. So there are a couple of things wrong with it. But again, you have for-profit schools who are their sole purpose is being for-profit, but not only are they getting whatever the $9,500, the $9,500, the $9,500. Let's say the $60,000. It was a for-profit school too that my son wanted to go to, and I was like, bro, what is wrong with you? Did you even read the college handbook that I gave you? What are you doing? Like it was ridiculous. But the $9,500 he would have had to take out, whatever grants that he would have gotten. Not saying students aren't entitled to grants, but for-profit schools getting grants to for-profit schools getting student loans and federal government grants, where a student is still being asked to take out private loans to account for 45, 50, 60% of the total balance is just fucking crazy. So it's just so many things wrong. The student loan problem isn't a solution with just, hey, if we get rid of student loans, it'll go away. Part of it is revamping the loan system. Part of it is the elimination of for-profit schools. Part of it is curtailing and limiting the amount of interest that the private sector can charge for student loans that people are getting to supplement their education. So if the max is $95, think about it. The max you said is $9,500. Let's say the student take out that max. You think they're not going to go to school? They're going to just go over to one of those private sector loan places, get a loan. It's the same wear and tear. That's actually, I'm not going to say it's worse, but it's equally as bad. I don't know. It's just student loans is just a tricky subject. Parent Plus loans doesn't have a cap. Yeah, Scott Johnson. But that telling would turn into some kid teaching our kids that slavery wasn't that bad. Yeah, that's fair too. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Plus loans, personal. Yeah, Florida. Yeah, Florida. Yeah, they don't want no. I was actually I had this conversation today. I hate the idea of states. The fact that that country is almost 20K separate police agencies is just silly. Many countries just have one federal policing agency. Max undergrad is 125K in a lifetime. Ah, man, it's just that shit is just hard, and it takes people coming to literally. I literally just talked about. I was talking about critical race theory in a text today, and I don't know. I was kind of confused because we were talking about an executive order that was done by President Trump related to critical race theory, and I was confused. I'm not in the military anymore, so I got some friends who are still in the military, and so let me see if I can find it because I was confused. Let me see. I'm gonna read exactly. I'm trying to read. Long story short, we was talking about Trump's executive order eliminating CRT from the military. And I was like, CRT, critical race theory? Is that being taught in the military? I know I didn't see it when I was coming in. I'm a little bit older. But then I was like, wait, CRT, only CRT I know from the military is combat readiness training. And I don't think they were confusing it with that. So I guess I got to ask some of my younger folks who are in the military, are they doing that? I didn't receive any of that training when I was coming through in the early 2000s, the 2000 through 2005, 2006. That wasn't a thing. There's pros and cons to both sides. Let's say education wasn't returned to the states. All certain administrations would do is just say, hey, well, we aren't going to teach. If you teach critical race theory, we're just going to choke off the funding for you. And some states won't teach it just because. Like, I don't know how it could be successfully maneuvered around if the financial threat is being held over certain states' heads not to do it. You know, I generally think that all history should be taught. And we look at the good, the bad, because that's how you learn from it. That's just what it is. I know who the Peterkins are because they owned the plantation that my family was on. And I know that my family owns some of the land to the former Peterkin plantation because, we just work hard and got some of it and purchased some of it and it's still in the family. I see both arguments. It's a crazy story. It's a long story. Ultimately, no matter how the pendulum swings with regard to returning certain things to the states and what should be done by the federal government, it's going to be an imperfect fix. It's going to be things that aren't going to want to give the solutions that would make everyone happy. So I don't know. It's kind of terrible, but I'm about to jump off here. I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me. This was a nice in-depth discussion. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Scott, AP, Candy Girl. Hey, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. But hey, we're gonna see how things are gonna go. I'm gonna let y'all know. I actually got a video that I did. I might post it. I might post it for like subscribers only or something like that. But there's a video I did like in my car where everybody was panicking about the jobs, and I'm like going to work, and I'm like, boop. I was like, okay, my badge still worked. That's the first. If you get a pink slip, and the first thing you gonna do when you try getting that parking, your badge don't work, you're gonna know it's gonna be a problem. But I'm gonna keep y'all posted as to how things develop with me. But the long story short is there's gonna be residual effects that's gonna reach out and touch all avenues of the economy in the public sector and the private sector. So I think the best thing that you can do is tighten up your belt. No large purchases over the next 24 months just till we get some stabilization. And whatever you can do, to get a bag, get the bag. No, you know that policy, no child left behind. We have a policy, no bag left behind. If you can get gig money, get it. If you got the time to get money by making content, make it. If you got the time to invest and get some dividends money, get that money. Get as much money as you can. Let me see. Yeah, I think I'm interested. Well, how could this go? I think I know how it's going to go when we talk about the Supreme Court. So it is what it is. I don't think anything is finite until the Supreme Court makes a decision. Now, hey, credit to President Trump. He took advantage of what he needed to take advantage of when he was in the office, and he made sure he got his appointees through. I don't care if it was his last 6 months on the job. He didn't fall for the smoke and mirrors that Obama fell for. He's like, I don't give a damn if I got 6 days left. I'm going to get this appointee through. But as far as the freezing of the federal funds, a lot of things are in limbo because of the courts. I don't think anything is finalized until it's reached the Supreme Court level. If it gets to the Supreme Court, I already know how it's leaning. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that statement. I think the immigration stuff is going to move forward. I don't think the birthright citizenship 14th Amendment argument is going to fly at the Supreme Court level. I just don't think that's going to fly. A lot of judges have knocked it down. A lot of Republican conservative judges will have knocked it down. Now, that doesn't mean that the Supreme Court, they can do whatever the hell they want to do. They don't got to follow anything. Everybody thought they had. That's what they told us in law school till I asked that question, what if they don't? And somebody didn't have an answer, but they don't have to follow anything. But I don't think the 14th Amendment birthright, I would be shocked if that flew at the Supreme Court. But I do think trade will probably fly. I think when it comes to the dismantling of the Department of Education, I think that it only can get done, and I think the court's finding is that it only can get done through a congressional act because a congressional act created it. But I think the trade stuff is probably going to be a little bit easier. I think the trade stuff is going to be a little bit easier to get done. I think the immigration stuff is going to fly, with the exception. I'm not so confident about the birthright argument at the Supreme Court. Not saying it's not possible because we know which way the Supreme Court lands, but I think the interpretation of that is pretty consistent across the board. With the Department of Education, U.S. aid, I think the finding is going to be if it was created as a creature of Congress, it has to be dismantled by a creating of Congress to do so. Now, again, Trump has the majority in the House and in the Senate, even though by a small margin. So that could possibly be done. But that's how I think those things are going to fall out. No. I'm not getting a Tesla. Can't do it. I had to take my car to the shop. I got an electric car that's not a Tesla that they gave me as a loaner car. I was like, nah. Like, even though I don't want to be stuck in traffic and I would love for my car to just drive me, I'm going to just stick it out the old school way. Just sit in traffic, and when somebody do something goofy, you complain and just give them some type of, flip them. This wasn't the proper finger, but the old school way. That's what we're doing for now. Yeah, all the tariffs and stuff. I kind of understand it in some regard, but I lean more towards it's a tax that we're gonna have to pay. But we'll do that one video. We'll have a weekly recap and just jump in on some political topics. Yeah, I'm about to get out of here. I appreciate everybody for tuning in and hanging in for this in-depth discussion. As always, I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a safe night. Be safe. Be blessed. Peace.